it's basically what's been happening in Dallas. So they lost to the Clippers in 7, and then Kristaps didn't have a good series, so he got kind of torn apart on social media and just by the media. And then a lot of other stuff with the front office has gone down. But we'll start with you, Noel. What are your thoughts on this whole rift between Luka and then just the Mavs front office?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's pretty concerning, especially with Rick Carlisle, with how many seasons he's been there, stepping down. And I think I look at it one of two ways, where if you're Luka Doncic, this team's basically revolves around you. And I would either think if I'm him that I want to take a bigger role in the front office and actually plan out players who I want to play with. Or if I'm Luka Doncic, I'm looking for other teams to maybe go to. I don't know how much of his contract is left. I'm sure you guys can speak on that. But I think it revolves around him, and if I'm him right now, I'm kind of concerned about the future of this franchise. So those are my initial thoughts. What about you guys?
Yeah, I had actually a slightly different reaction because Luka Doncic has already said, right, that he wants to sign the first big extension. You know, the one Jason Tatum signed, Jaylen Brown signed. He said he wants to sign that max extension right away, and I think people have said he's going to sign it, and then people said with Carlisle and Don Nelson, at least with Don Nelson, there was a report about how there was an analytics gambling guy that had taken over the front office. So Don Nelson was unhappy about that. But then Mark Cuban called that BS on Twitter. And then with Rick Carlisle, there was a report that him and Luka had a rift. And that's why he decided they mutually parted ways, but it seemed that Rick Carlisle stepped down rather than them firing Rick Carlisle. So I think both of those things are very interesting, because obviously if Luka Doncic and the coach aren't getting along, you're probably siding with Luka Doncic because the NBA is just a players' league. But I actually happen to think Rick Carlisle is an excellent coach. I know there were some questionable decisions that he's made since they won the title in 2011. I know Dallas hasn't gone very far since they've won the title in 2011. But if you look at Rick Carlisle's resume, you start off with what he did with my Pistons. He took them to their first Eastern Conference Finals in 2003 before the 5 straight. Larry Brown came in and won the championship the next year, but he was the first coach to take him there. Then he went to Indiana, won 61 games. Then he won one of the great rings, honestly, with Dallas, the teams that they went through, beating the defending champs Lakers, sweeping them, and beating the LeBron, D-Wade, Chris Bosh Heat. That was really impressive with Dirk Nowitzki. So I happen to think Rick Carlisle really is an excellent coach. And like, one of the things, Blake, you actually make this point to me all the time, and I think it's one of the best, most astute points I've ever heard when it comes to coaching changes. It's, well, yeah, you can fire a coach, right? Like in the NFL, you can fire a Ron Rivera if you're the Panthers, you know, a good, solid coach, but maybe you can do better. But who are you hiring to ensure that, you know, you're getting better? And that's my question with the Dallas Mavericks, right? I know Luka's going to be great. I know that they'll find a way to probably unload Kristaps and work things around and create some help for Luka, just because they will do that. Now, whether it will be the optimum amount of help, I don't think so. But can they do something to get it better around him? I believe that. But the biggest question to me is, how do you replace Rick Carlisle? Because I know he's a little bit hot and cold at this point. Some people think he's still really good, like me, who've watched basketball for very long time, and he was really good back then, and he slowed down a little bit, but some people don't think he's that good. I mean, Dallas had the greatest statistical offense in NBA history last year, and it was with Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith. This wasn't, you know, the 17 Warriors with KD, Steph, and Clay. So he had to have been doing a couple of things right. So I think that's the big question. Like, okay, you replaced Rick Carlisle. You're probably going to bring in a coach that's very compatible with Luka Doncic, but is that coach going to make you better? Because getting rid of Carlisle means that you think you can get better, and I'm not sure how many coaches are better than him.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the first point you made you mentioned the guy who's kind of been running the front office, and that's why Don Nelson was mad. His name's I don't know how to pronounce his first name. He goes by Bob though. So Bob Voulgaris, he's like a professional bettor. I believe he does poker.
Mm-hmm. He's a gambler.
Yeah, he's very analytically driven, and from what I've gathered, he's very influential in the decision making and transactions and rotations that have gone on with the Mavericks. And some people don't like that about him, and maybe they've said he's a little too arrogant and a little over his head. And I guess that's how you kind of have to be as a gambler, right? You have to trust your instincts, and maybe that's not the best thing you want in a front office. So that's kind of what I think the main reason has been calling with the issue with the Mavs. And then also Mark Cuban too. I don't know what's up with him, but I feel like a lot has changed in the last 10 years. If you guys remember, there was the hidden, I think it was sexual misconduct or assault that he didn't know that was going on in the organization that he later found out about. That's concerning. And now this, where a couple days, there was stuff in the media like, oh, there's issues with the Mavs front office. He said, no, that's total BS. Next day, your coach leaves and your GM's gone. So clearly he must not have known about that either. And that begs me the question, like, I think Mark Cuban's an awesome guy, obviously very successful businessman, but is he really that engaged with the team now? You see him on the sidelines and stuff, but if there's all this stuff in the front office that he doesn't know about or he's unaware of, that's very concerning because he's the guy at the top and a lot of the decisions go through him. So that's concerning to me. And then with the head coach, I think you just got to find a guy for Luka. Typically, NFL, I would say usually you don't cater to one person's needs because it's a really big team and you can't run a team or have an NFL team run by one player in most cases. But in basketball, it's all about the stars. I mean, you look at the teams now, it's not all about who has the best, 10-man rotation, who has the most complete team. It's about who has the superstars because those guys win games, and you're going to have to find someone for Luka. And I'm with you, Vish. I think Carlisle's a good coach. I don't think he'll have any trouble finding a job next year. I know he's talked about going to the Bucks, even though they're still in the playoffs, which would be an incredible fit, maybe even in Philly for him too, depending on what they do with Doc. But bottom line is you got to find someone that makes Luka happy because as of right now, he is your saving grace. He is the hope. He is the face of the franchise. And I'm going with the player instead of the coach if I'm an NBA team, especially someone as uber talented as Luka and as young as he is.
I have one question for both of you, and it's something that Blake touched on. And Noel, I want to hear your thoughts on this first. You touched on whether Cuban is aware or not. I want to ask that question. Do you think Cuban is unaware, or do you think he's playing it off as if the media doesn't know anything? And he's well aware that, that this analytics guy is pissing off Don Nelson and this analytics guy is pissing off Rick Carlisle, but he just prefers Vulgaris, you said his name was. He just prefers Vulgaris to them.
We'll go by Bob. Bob's probably
Bob. And just another thing with Don Nelson, if you guys don't remember in 08-09 when Don Nelson, not Bob, when Don Nelson was coaching the Warriors, this was at the end of his coaching career, the last time he coached. He was one of the pioneers for the NBA going smaller. He kind of started that trend. Now, he doesn't really get credit for it because he didn't win a championship with it or anything, but he was one of the people who originally saw where the league was going. And I think that's I would argue that him and Carlisle are two of the more progressive people in the NBA because they've survived through this entire league change, right? Like Carlisle's been coaching since the early 2000s when it was slow-paced ISO basketball to this very fast, heavy three-point shooting movement league. And the fact that the Mavs have been able to adapt, I mean, Luka Doncic helps that a lot, to me shows how progressive they are organizationally. So I guess long story short, my question is, do you think Cuban is actually aware and he's playing it off that he's unaware? And two, do you think that the Mavs will remain one of these progressive organizations without Don Nelson and Rick Carlisle?
So I'll jump in first, and I think we just had a comment come in from the man Jamal, and I almost completely agree. I think Mark Cuban is a businessman first. I think he's fully aware. I think he's always trying to patch up. If there's a problem that emerges and the media gets a hold of it, he'll make it into something that seems a little bit less of a problem. But I think what Blake was saying that makes perfect sense is he's kind of got caught in doing that, where he said it's not a problem, and it is a problem. So I'm curious if he might change his approach, but I think right now and in the past, he's definitely been aware, and he's definitely playing it off that it's better than what it is.
I guess to respond to that, I would say he might be aware, but does he know the full extent of it? Because I don't think he would come out and say that's total BS if he knew that the GM and the head coach were thinking of resigning. Maybe he would have said, I'm aware of this, or I have. I guess I don't know what he would say. Oh, it's a tough position to be in, honestly. But the thing that concerns me is it's not the first time it's happened, and that's where I'm a little concerned. Because if this was like a one-off thing, you'd say, okay, like it just happened once. But with what happened in the past, which is a very serious matter that he didn't know about, that is concerning to me. So I don't know. I guess Jamal brings up a good point with Shark Tank. Shark Tank is great, but I feel like he's pretty cut and dry on Shark Tank. He'll tell you if your idea sucks or not. So I don't know. I just don't know if maybe he's out of it or maybe he's not. But it's just concerning that this has happened a couple times. And he's been either completely unaware or he'll say something and the exact opposite is true. But what did you think, Vish?
I agree with Noel. I think he's BSing. Now, the sexual misconduct thing, I don't want to place any accusations. I have no clue about that. That was a really ugly situation. Mm-hmm. The fact that he was unaware, to me, brings some culpability because he is the CEO and leader of that organization. So I would hope that's something you're aware about. So to me, that was very disturbing. This one, I actually think that I don't know if he's unaware or I don't know if he's maybe looking to be more powerful maybe in their front office, because I'm assuming, given Don Nelson and Rick Carlisle's track records before they took over running Dallas, they both probably had the largest say and they had a very specific way they wanted to do things. And maybe with Cuban bringing in Bob and him really liking what Bob has to say, and because Cuban being a tech guy, I'm sure his mind thinks a little more logically and he thinks more critically. And Don Nelson and Rick Carlisle are probably basketball purists. I'm sure he can understand the breakdown of numbers and logical sense of if we play this guy X amount of minutes and this guy plays X amount of minutes, algorithmically it makes sense, right? So maybe he understands basketball a little better like that, and maybe they want to be a more analytical driven team. I have no clue. I'm just speculating off the cuff. But I think this is a little bizarre. I understand how old Don Nelson is. He's 81. I understand how old Rick Carlisle is. I think he's in his 60s. But to me, the way they both went out like this, especially when you have the Mavs who have Luka Doncic, right? Like you have Luka Doncic. Who would want to leave a team with Luka Doncic? It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm. And you go, Noel.
You got it, Blake. You got it.
I was just going to say one final thought if you want to go first, Noel.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing I've been thinking about is regardless of who the new coach is, because they were such a fringe team to almost having everything they needed to make a run for the ship, that I think there's a good chance, regardless of who comes in, it could be a little bit shaky at the start. So I'm very curious how the team buys in, and Luka especially, because I think if you're going to be at the level they were this series, this playoffs, to where they really have to buy into the culture. I think Carlisle had that culture with all the years he'd been there. So I'm going to be very curious how this team kind of comes together with this new coach and if they fit or not.
Interesting. And I guess my final thought on this was just how I guess this happened last year with the Clippers too, but how we all thought it was, rainbows and butterflies for the Mavericks, but then they lose the series. Porzingis doesn't play well. Players or coaches and front office start leaving, and now all this stuff about Luka being mad at the team. And he did just come out and say he wants to sign the Supermax, which I think he gets like $40 million a year, so kind of makes sense. It's a lot of money, but it's crazy how this all comes out after the fact. And we saw this with the Clippers too, like people not respecting Paul George. And it's really crazy how just one quick thing, a quick loss in a Game 7 will just break apart a team so quickly. You wouldn't know if they would have won. Like if they would have won, I feel like most of this would not have come out, and that's crazy to think about.
You know what the shocking thing to me is that, like, I understand Dallas is a really good basketball team and Luka Doncic is a great player. But if you just stack the two teams on paper, to me, getting to 7 games with the Clippers and winning 3 games in LA is a massive win. It tells you how good you are organizationally, especially the fact that they competed in those games And one of their big adjustments was going zone with 3 bigs to match the Clippers' small lineups. And they had 3 defensive liabilities on the floor and 2 main in Kristaps Porzingis and Boban. And then Luka Doncic isn't the best defender either. So the fact that they competed with that roster, especially given there was a lot of questions at that with their depth, there was a lack of a secondary ball handler. To me, it's a testament to the Mavericks organization, a testament to how close they are and how close Luka is to being great. So to me, I actually think it's more bizarre than anything, because if I was them, I'd be ready to run it back, try and unload Kristaps and pick up, a true second star that complements Luka. And Noel has talked about it in the past, a guy who can be a secondary ball handler. And bang, you're probably one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the West next year.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But I think that'll wrap up this topic. So basically, Mavericks might have some trouble with the front office, and I know they said they want to get a head or a GM before they get a coach, but we'll see how this all plays out over the offseason. But it does look like Luka is going to come back, so we can stop photoshopping him with Warriors jerseys, with Nets jerseys, with Celtics jerseys. That just needs to end now. I don't think NBA could handle a few on the Warriors, but